Hello, my name is Rich Davis. I'm the Archaeology Advisor to the Methow Field Institute, the Methow Valley Interpretive Center, and lead on the Methow Artifact Research Project. Today I'd like to talk about our valley, its past, and its probable earliest occupations. In regards how climate change created a niche for ancient Methow residents. We hear a lot of discussion regarding the changing climate. Climate change has certainly formed part of Earth's story from its beginning. Endless studies and theories have and will be set forth for the distant past, and predictions will be made for the future. However, currently our particular interest lies in the specifics of how climate has regulated the ability of humans to populate the north-central Columbia Plateau, and specifically the Methow Valley. We hope to establish a theoretical timeline by using the results of testing by other research of several disciplines, then coupling that information with the knowledge we have gained from the Methow Artifact Research Project. A few definitions might be appropriate along the way, and we will keep them simple for the sake of clarity. Scientists have divided the past into chronologic or time periods. These periods can be of cultural change, climate, or any significant category that needs to be defined by the time of its occurrence. For this report, we have chosen to focus on the Pleistocene-Holocene boundary. This period occurred 12,600 to 10,200 years before present. Before that time, there is little to no evidence existing to indicate humans occupied the north-central Columbia Plateau. That does not mean there were not visitors, and evidence in surrounding areas indicates a peopling of the North American continent, including the western United States, many thousands of years before. We can establish reasons for the relatively late occupation in the Methow Valley by using several methods of research done by others. A particularly specific and apt compilation of this research is climate change at the Pleistocene-Holocene boundary in the Pacific Northwest. This study compiles and analyzes glacial, faunal, pollen, and stratigraphic proxy datasets for climate change in the Pacific Northwest of North America and compares them to the coeval archaeological record. The primary purpose of this exercise is to consider the potential ways in which climate change at the Pleistocene-Holocene boundary affected cultural development for late Paleo-Indian, early Archaic peoples in the Pacific Northwest. The results indicate that climatic and environmental change at this interval was rapid or abrupt, and of a magnitude that has likely produced varying adaptational responses by people of different cultural traditions who appear across the region at this period. And quoting from that report, transformations in tools and technology, shifts in dietary habits, migration and regionalization, and trade intensification are all elements of late Paleo-Indian, early Archaic cultural responses to the rapid climate change. We all know that there was a long glacial period preceding the Pleistocene-Holocene boundary, and it was extended across the North Cascades. This was called the Balling-Allarad period. The long warming trend began around 17,700 BP and ended around 13,200 BP when it was interrupted by a return of cold conditions from 13,200 to 11,400 before present. This period was known as the Younger Dryas. It was characterized by a rapid return to glacial conditions in latitudes of the northern hemisphere, dramatic increases in global ice volume, and a shift in the track of the jet stream over the northwestern United States. The shift in regimes is evidenced by increases in cold-adapted animal and pollen species, decreases in warm-adapted taxa, and geochemical changes in areas across North America and Europe. Coterminous with the last stages of this Younger Dryas period are the extinction of many large bodily animals across North America, including mammoths, mastodons, ancient bison, camelids, horses, and giant ground sloths. And a reduction in body sizes of selected early Holocene fauna, including bison and elk, appears to occur in concert with this extinction. Terminal Pleistocene megafauna have often been found stratigraphically above a black organic rich layer of soil at sites across the United States. These soils are radiocarbon dated to 12,725 to 11,220 years before present, and are interpreted as stratigraphic manifestations of the sudden shift from the Bowling Allarod, the long glacial ice melt period, the warming, to the Younger Dryas cooling period. Somewhere within the period between 12,600 and 10,200 before present, the surrounding Columbia Plateau and most non-mountainous areas of the West Coast were experiencing a long warming trend. Of course, glaciation ceased and the recession began dramatically. People already occupying areas surrounding the Pacific Northwest during this dynamic period likely encountered rapidly occurring changes in climate and subsequent changes in the distribution of significant economic and subsistence resources. Again, quote, the dramatic changes that are observed in the paleoclimatic and paleoenvironmental record of the Pacific Northwest during the late Pleistocene, early Holocene were of a magnitude that has not since been paralleled in faunal and stratigraphic geomorphological proxy. During the long warming trend that eventually ended the last glacial advances, but before the Younger Dryas cooling, the plateau itself experienced those thousands of years with conditions that over time created an abundance of grasslands. Great herds of animals roamed the grasslands and fed on this bounty and created a wonderful mix of prey and predator. As outlined earlier, large mammals evolved with or migrated to the transformed area. Now there is ample evidence to support at least 14,000 years of occupation, human occupation, on the western portion of our continent. With the increase in warmth, vegetation, and game, there followed what are termed highly mobile hunter-gatherer people. Their hunting methods utilized spears and atlatl-thrown darts. These weapons required a high level of skill, but were extremely effective against large beasts such as those mentioned above, as well as deer, elk, antelope, and other grazing animals. Much evidence has been unearthed to support the coincidence of these weapons associated with the remains of these quarry animals. The stone used to create the highly refined projectile points for these atlatls needed to be of high quality, generally cryptocrystalline material. The stone needed high impact strength and had to serve the several needs of killing, chopping, and butchering. Generally, and this is important, the tools needed to be readily available. They needed to be transported in a fashion that allowed the hunters to be mobile and prepared. In other words, the stone material had to be transported in an economic, ready-to-finish, and available form. This form we call a quarry blank, a near-complete simulation of the final tool needed and made from high-quality quarried material. Well, time progresses, and we find that just prior to the ensuing Pleistocene-Holocene boundary, when the Younger Dryas cooling effects caused the event, a depletion of grasslands and the other vegetation which supported the prolific wildlife, particularly the larger grazing animals and their larger predators, resulted. This period, called or the early Holocene period, extended for at least several thousand years thereafter. Searching for game, the hunter-gatherers were again on the move. There, finding their prey in smaller forms, they changed their hunting strategies. Still using an atlatl, they eventually reduced the size of their spear points. Their journeys led them higher into the newly exposed river valleys that were the result of glacier melt and cutting. As new ground was exposed, so did vegetation, then the animals that fed on it. There was cooler weather at higher elevations and closer to the remaining glaciers. Here again, life was abundant. Other resources became more available in the lakes and streams left behind by glacial melt. Aquatic species were now more of a part of subsistence diets. New strategies were needed to obtain these resources, both in acquisition and in storage for the lean winter months. Although it appears that anadromous fish had not yet established in great numbers in the upper Columbia River and its tributaries, other fish, shellfish, and aquatic plants contributed to a more secure and possibly a slightly more sedentary method of surviving. We believe that the Methow Valley followed similar patterns of discovery and settlement as the bulk of the north-central Columbia Plateau. All this change, along with many other climate-initiated changes, contributed to the evolving population of the Methow Valley until the advent of European intrusion, which interrupted ancient lifeways. We have now hopefully set the stage for the evidence that has come to light regarding artifact finds in the Methow Valley. That evidence is in the form of projectile points. Their dates of origin align with the earliest probable habitable environment in the valley, the Pleistocene-Holocene boundary. And I'm quoting a statement here: when excavation, radiocarbon, or other dating based on stratigraphy are not present, projectile points are the most reliable and consistent indicators of a particular phase of occupation, and that's very important. In our bibliography, we list a few of the sources for the information we have presented and for the evidence we will now present. Several years ago, the Methow Valley Interpretive Center initiated the Methow Artifact Research Project. The primary purpose and intent of the project is to reintroduce artifacts collected since Europeans first entered the valley. Most have been stored away, often treasured by those who inherited, discovered, or somehow came into their possession. New construction in the valley has exposed many of the artifacts that have come to our attention. As an example, the authors found many artifacts on their land while digging fence posts, gardening, planting, lawns, and again, these are treasured and shared within Methow Valley Interpretive Center, and the information is part of the record available to all, including, and most importantly, the Methow tribal descendants. As the years have progressed and more people have allowed us to photograph, study, and sometimes test their artifacts, we have encountered some amazing anomalies that have reinforced our belief that the Methow people's ancestry dates back to the Pleistocene-Holocene boundary. Given the information we discussed earlier, it follows that although very little formal archaeological excavation has occurred here in the valley proper, the artifacts that have been uncovered support a similar timeline for the valley that compares to the rest of the north-central Columbia Plateau all the way up to the historic period. Now let us apply results of our Methow Valley Artifact Research Project research to the results of other findings done across the north-central Columbia Plateau over the past several decades. It has been established that the wind dust phase was a classification placed on the occupation during the period of years arguably occurring between 10,800 and 8,500 years before present. Various experts are debating the styles within this phase, their variabilities, and the information that is developing constantly with new dating methods and new finds. The wind dust phase projectile points are unique in their diagnostic attributes and represent a clear type with various subtypes. The style has been positively dated by radiocarbon dating and stratigraphic references. Positive and relative dating can be defined as follows. Relative dating places an item of historic importance, such as an artifact, within a general span of time. However, positive dating places an object in a specific span of time. Thus far, we have been fortunate to have photos and material samples of two wind dust style projectile points from the Methow Valley. Shown later, you will see that artifact number 13 and it was discovered by the author along with other artifacts at a suspected site, which includes lithic debitage, a bifacially chipped scraper, and fire-altered rock. This may represent a habitation site. It is being eroded by the river. Further work might be possible on this site. The other example, labeled Artifact 21, comes from a location close by the first and could be part of another site rather than an isolated object. We can now reliably say we have strong evidence based on these wind dust projectile points of occupation in the Methow Valley that occurred as early as 11,000 years before present. Another projectile point style that is indicative of the Pleistocene-Holocene boundary period has been named the Hasket style. These are shown in artifacts number 15 and number 43. Again, the examples of this style on the north-central Columbia Plateau are rare, and this rarity extends across the plateau itself. The closest known Hasket site was recently found and excavated below Vantage above the Columbia River. Called the Sentinel Gap site, the projectile points found there were mostly broken with just a couple of exceptions. One interesting observation was made regarding the Sentinel Gap site artifacts. The complete specimens were diagnosed as having bag wear patterns. This wear is indicative of the wear created from being transported a long distance in a bag or loose container. In other words, the stone material is transported from its origin over a long distance by its curator or owners. This is important because these people were traveling and expected to find that possibly they would not find the right kind of material where they were headed. And so they decided they would take their material with them so that they could create the kind of projectile points that they needed. This Hasket site on the Columbia dates to 10,200 years before present. Those experts who have compiled the available information on the Hasket style in Washington State have elected to place a positive date of occurrence of this style and its creators at 10,200 before present. Both the wind dust and the Hasket styles are considered part of a designation of styles called the Western Stem Tradition, or WST. Relatively recent dating of styles within this classification has caused most projectile point specialists to argue for a population separate from the Clovis people and likely representing the first Americans in the western United States. It should be noted that in the Methow Valley geology as currently recorded, there is little native stone that has the properties needed to create adequate projectile points or cutting tools with extremely sharp edges created by knapping. One exception is a fine-grained dacite-like material, black or dark gray in color, that does exhibit good high-impact strength and good to excellent knapping qualities. This material can be found mixed among the river cobbles, probably glacially transported to the valley. The two window style and the black Hasket style points shown below are crafted from this fine quality material. In conclusion, and given the evidence and the specimens found in the mid-valley, all were located between Twisp and Carlton, we can propose migrating hunter-gatherers were exploring newly available territory they found our valley. There undoubtedly have been projectile points, knives, blades found in the Methow Valley in the past that would have photographed, examined, and measured, add to our slim projectile point record. We highly encourage bringing to our attention any information of the existence of projectile points from the valley. Any donors of information or projectile points can be assured of any level of anonymity they wish. Any preferred information has no strings attached. It might be appropriate to add that our studies are revealing a relatively continuous occupancy of the Methow drainage for most of the periods, phases that followed the Pleistocene-Holocene transition, and further projectile point study could reinforce that belief. Thank you very much.